Well, welcome to the Just Jim Radio Show. We're here today, and as we always are, bringing inspiration, information, a little bit of fun into your life and helping you be able to see and experience yourself differently, to allow yourself to experience more fulfillment and be able to understand your depths, your heights, your inner being more fully and completely. And so we're here to offer that kind of information through our show. Today we're going to be talking about healing with the heart, and we'll be talking with Mitch Earle, who's here joining us today. Mitch understands his purpose as being a communicator. He is a double cum laude graduate of UC Berkeley with degrees in classical it's easy for you to say, rhetorical training and political science. It all sounds very interesting, Mitch. I'm not meaning to disregard or disrespect your degrees there. He's been a writer all of his life, print journalist in Los Angeles and Atlanta. He is a ghostwriter and authoring his own book, Discovering Self-Worth Through Love Lost, One Man's Journey. And so he has a writing background and some degrees to support who he is and how he is. It served him well, later becoming a clear and creative voice, as he describes himself, after losing his fear of public speaking with the support of a teacher that was making him repeatedly read announcements in front of hundreds of Sunday congregants, which is a good thing, giving some practice. He's forever grateful for someone believing in him and knowing the truth about him, and bringing out in him his own truth, and believing and knowing the spiritual truth about the world has helped Mitch learn and use his God-given talents as a writer and a speaker to make a difference on conscious radio news announcing and speaking as an MC, documentary narrator and moderator and licensed spiritual counselor. Gosh, Mitch, you got a lot going on there. And engages with others using compassionate, nonviolent communication. Appropriately, as he states here, his email is avoicewithspirit@yahoo.com. And for that, I'm very grateful to have your voice, your spirit, and you with us today to talk about healing with the heart. Welcome, Mitch.
Thank you, Jim. I'm so grateful to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you. And yes, I think the first thing that I had to learn at UC Berkeley was how to pronounce the word rhetoric, and it took me. I think it took me the first quarter. So you're right on time.
All right, no problem. We won't be rhetorical about that.
No, not at all.
And so today, we're in February, and we've got Valentine's Day hovering around us. People paying attention to what that means, and so it seems appropriate to bring our attention to the heart and healing with the heart, different than healing from the heart, but healing with the heart. But what is healing? What is that all about? What does that really mean? And so we have to identify, because people will see it in different ways. They'll notice healing sometimes being symptomatic, or a situation going on with them with a physical symptom or a difficulty they're experiencing. And yet we know that healing is so much more than that. Our being, our body, our mind, our emotions are constantly returning to a state of wholeness. They're constantly returning to a state of balance. They're constantly allowing us to experience the freedom that we are when we're not distracted in another direction, or we're not aware, or we're not present, or we're not there. And so life has so many things going on in it that can have us not recognize our wholeness, not be in balance, and not be able to experience our freedom. And yet it's a key to who we are and how we can heal or return to that natural state of who we truly are, of perfection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And in fact, you're inviting me to recall something that I think about for myself and share with others all the time. It's a definition of healing from Ernest Holmes, whose philosophy is now the Centers for Spiritual Living. And Ernest Holmes, said that healing is the revealing of the truth. And in a nutshell, that's exactly what I heard you just say, Jim, that love is who we are. It is the truth of our beingness. Now, in the physical world, we get, jostled about. It's the nature of, the game of life that we've signed up for and that we're engaging in. And back of all that, at the center of it, is the perfect balance, as you said, the perfect wholeness. And that aspect of freedom, the freedom to choose that which feels loving, that which in your heart of hearts, as it's often said, to be, air quotes, the right thing to do. Well, the right thing to do is, another way to ask it is, what would love do? What would love do?
Yes, that's a beautiful way of putting that. What would love do? And gosh, we can get so caught up in our world, like you said, and yet return to love. I believe Marianne Williamson wrote that book. A beautiful book, bringing in a lot of beautiful ideas about how we can remember the love that we are. And yet we make our way through our day with, thousands and thousands of thoughts and dozens of feelings and all kinds of activities that we've got going on. And the key to healing, I find, is living in that wholeness, living in that freedom, living in that balance, which means we really have to, we don't have to do anything. Like you said, it's a choice, which is important. It's important to bring up because we can choose at any point to be where we are and to recognize, as you said, referencing Ernest Holmes, our truth. And as you mentioned, truth will set us free, and so does love, this aspect of the heart being the love that we are. And that's how I see, in knowing our connection within and knowing our connection to ourselves as love, that we can bring that into our thoughts, have loving thoughts, and then have that love influence our ability to live our emotions wide open and let them flow, not in disrespect to anyone else, but to be able to feel them fully. And in allowing that flow of our truth, of our love, of our mind, of our emotions, it allows for the movement within our body physically to have the freedom to do what it's meant to do, return to its natural state of wholeness. And so it certainly is about these things we're speaking about on a higher level, and then how they can be brought into how we're living our lives in the real world.
Absolutely. And I believe it all begins from within, that it's our reconnection with our source. Most of us, or many of us, call it God. But whatever words you want to use, higher being, spiritual power, Christ consciousness, Atman presence, Buddha, there's just many different ways to label it. But I think the most important thing is that feeling of reconnection with our source. I often use the example, Jim, of a plug in a wall. And if it's partially out, then the connection is not going to be there. The juice isn't going to flow. The electricity, in that case, isn't going to flow. And if we're feeling a disconnection in any way from love, from our physical human perspective, to me, it's always about reconnecting. And again, it's many of us have equated God with love, that they're synonymous. Well, if we're reconnecting with Source, God, we're reconnecting with love.
Absolutely. And knowing who we are as love is a key and important piece in the healing process. And no better symbol this time of year, or any time of year, or ask anyone walking down the street what's most important. They'll frequently say to love and be loved. And the first thing that comes to their mind is the heart. The heart being that center of our being. I find that very interesting. If we look at ourselves literally, physically, our heart is right there in the center of us. If we look at ourselves energetically and we look at the 7 chakras, 3 above, 3 below, it's that center chakra, that point, that hub through which we function within the world. It's the place that, as you're speaking of that connection to Source or our spirit or our inspiration, can make its way through us and into the world. And in what ways the heart and its love can be healing becomes obvious when we surrender into it. I mean, I know that when I'm experiencing love, I feel such deep comfort. It's almost like being hugged by it, in that I feel so open, so free to just be. And that's I think of as people go into a hospital and they're put in a hospital bed, the first thing that they're doing there is they're taking their vital signs, and they're taking their vital signs for a reason. They're looking how they can get varying aspects of who they are physiologically to the right state that allows them to heal most easily. Their blood pressure, their respiration, the different aspects of who they are. As we allow ourselves to be in touch with the heartbeat of our being on many levels and who we are and where we are, we create that balanced place where we can naturally heal as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that visual that I got from the example of the vitals. And I believe it is vital, as we're talking about, to be in that balance. When we're out of balance, then it's much more difficult to feel loving in and about ourselves, and therefore, with others.
Well, we can certainly be distracted by many things. I mean, they say life happens. Whoever they is, and I'll have a conversation with them one of these days, but they say life happens, and it does. It does. And it's interesting, though, to me, sometimes people will say, well, gosh, why did this happen, or why did that happen? A loss or a difficulty or a challenge. And I believe it's really comes back to the book that we were just speaking about a moment ago, that we're returning to that place within us. It directs us to finding what it is that is needed, not just in the situation we might be experiencing, but within ourselves. It deepens us. It allows us to feel more fully. I mean, as I'm periodically, or actually frequently, doing celebrations of life as a minister, I'll walk into a room of 30 to 100 people who are there that are celebrating somebody's life, but at the same time, their hearts are wide open in sometimes a deep state of sorrow. And yet, it is the same place in that deep state that it can be filled with love to bring that back to balance, that pendulum swing out to the distraction or out to the difficulty, that when we are in love, it brings us back to that center point. Because as you mentioned, we are love.
You're right, exactly. It's who we are. And it's again, to me, always bringing ourselves back to that balance that you were talking about earlier, the vital signs on the physical level, and what feels comforting, what feels sweet, what feels free. It's really taking our own internal vibrational temperature, if you will. Actually, I like that. That just came to me.
Our spiritual vital signs.
Yes, our spiritual vital signs. That's right. There we are. Yes, exactly. And you were speaking of the, I'm sorry to step on you there, Jim. The heart-centered communication is what came to mind, that the being in our heart centers. And then as we're in our heart centers through meditation, through prayer, whatever our spiritual practices may be, being in nature, being around uplifting people, reading, spiritual masters, all these different things that we are able to do on the physical level, then the communications that we have with ourselves are heart-centered, and from that, our communications out in the world are. And that's, I believe, ultimately where we're going as we're moving from the Piscean age into this Aquarian age, thank God, that with the Divine Feminine in particular, and in this month of love, celebrating it, we know that while we celebrate on Valentine's Day or around that time frame, just like with Thanksgiving and gratitude, we can be in gratitude, year round, and we can be in love all the time as well.
True. And I like to see that love is the vehicle through which our spirit is able to flow. It is the doorway in the world. You see, for me, there are spiritual ideals and principles